welcome to another Melbourne AWS user group. We're up to February of 2021 already. We're still in the same situation we were through most of last year, but we've got another great night of content for you. Two excellent presenters, so let's just kick right into it. Where are my slides? Here we go. All right, so as always, I'm doing the introductions first up. Then we'll have Ian and friends will be running through the news and what's new in AWS in the last month. Then our first presenter, Jason Wood, does a review of AWS native backup options. And then our second presenter, Matthew, who is a regular presenter throughout last year, asked the question, who says I shouldn't IoT my whole house on the cheap? Both going to be really good. It's going to be a really exciting night. We'll wrap up around 8 p.m. and we'll have a post meetup drinks on Zoom as we usually do. Keep an eye on Slack for the URL for that later on. I'm going to turn off the echo in my head. There we go. Okay. If it's your first time watching our live stream, welcome along. We encourage you to ask questions of our presenters whenever you can. Because obviously we're broadcasting on YouTube, interactivity is a little bit limited, but you can post your questions on Slack, and the URL for Slack will be coming up in a minute. You can post them on Twitter using the AWS Melb hashtag, or right there in the chat on YouTube where you're watching this. And if you do happen to be watching this on repeat, on delay later on, tomorrow, the next day, the day after, whenever you might like to be watching it, feel free to ask any questions you have of our presenters on Slack. They're usually hanging around at some point anyway. So once you've asked your questions, at the end of the presentation, myself or Ian, my co-host, will jump on the stream with the presenter, and we'll ask those questions on your behalf. We do also encourage and welcome any comments or feedback you might have through those same channels on Slack. This side, isn't it? On Slack, on Twitter, and on YouTube. You'd think after 12 months of hosting these things, I would know my left from right on the screen, but apparently not. So, speaking of 12 months of virtual meetups, we'd love to thank our gold sponsor, Enabler, for sticking with us throughout lockdown, as well as all of last year and the year prior to that as well. And they'll be with us through most of 2021 too, at least. A huge thank you to them. We can't put these events on, and hopefully when we get back into real physical in-person events soon, we'll definitely be needing their support at that point too. So huge thanks to them. But also that's not forgetting our silver sponsors, AC3, CMD, and Do It International, who also have valuable contributions to this community, and we appreciate all four of our sponsors for sticking with us and supporting us during regular times, but also for this last 12 months. So a little bit about who are we. My name's Rob. I usually go by Bok as well. So I'm at Bok on Slack or at Bok_ on Twitter. My co-host, who you'll be seeing in a minute, is Ian. Now, neither Ian nor I, nor anybody else really involved in the volunteering for this user group work for Amazon or AWS. We're an organization that's run by the community. So that has its perks. Obviously, we get to speak our minds. We don't have to toe the sales line or anything like that either. So if you wanted to come on and say that Azure does something better or Google Cloud does something better than AWS, this is absolutely a safe space where we welcome all opinions. So speaking of Slack, I should probably juggle those slides around a little bit. You can jump on or join our Slack at the URL that's there, melb.awsug.org.au/Slack. And there are a number of really fun channels on there. There's a general channel where it's a great place to ask any questions you might have. If you're looking for help on how to get something done in AWS, that sort of thing, that's a great place to ask. There's usually a few hundred people lurking around during the day with various degrees of activity, but there's always people around. We have a jobs channel as well, which is a great place to post any positions you have, especially if you're looking for work. It's a great place to idle in. We have a volunteers channel if you'd like to be involved in the running of the group. And we have two channels that are mostly run by bots. The AWS outages channel, which is where a lot of people congregate anytime there is an outage at AP Southeast 2, and the announcements channel to discuss anything that comes through from AWS. But there are other ways to get involved. We're always looking for speakers. Especially finding speakers during lockdown has been really difficult. So a huge thanks again to Jason and Matt for stepping up tonight and helping out. Not looking for sponsors at the moment, but we are always looking for volunteers as well. There's a whole bunch of things like small jobs, big jobs, that we just don't get the time to get done because we're volunteers as well. So we're doing this in our free time. Things like video editing, updating the websites, all sorts of small jobs, that sort of stuff. So if you've got a little bit of time that you could help out, it doesn't have to be a lot. Please jump in the volunteers channel on Slack. All right. Wait, I just ran out of slides. I should have had 2 more slides. I know what happened there. That's all right. We will do something fancy. Where's my... Here we go. Let's just change this up. So what else is on in the community? A big shout out to our one of our sister groups, the Melbourne AWS Programming and Tools group. They've been running continuously as well throughout lockdown. This is not them. Unfortunately, they don't usually have an event up for me to announce or to publicize for them when I do this segment. But definitely, if you're interested in the hands-on side of AWS, jump onto Meetup and have a look for them. It's the AWS Programming and Tools group. They do run meetups every month as well, so there's another great one to be involved in. So a few other things that are on. Some of the non-AWS specific groups have started to come back for the year, so including Melb.net. This month, they've actually got a talk on migrating away from AWS to Azure, which is, well, I guess maybe we shouldn't be promoting that, but it's also good to see the other side of the fence. Some of the pain points that might have led them to making that decision and why they did that sort of thing. But that promises to be an interesting one. I got to jiggle this again. And then the data engineering meetup is back as well. They've got a 2-parter this month about building modern data stacks, and a look at Snowplow from the manufacturer of that, both of which should be interesting as well. This one's a 2-parter on the same day. I think they're one in the day and one at lunchtime and one in the evening. But if you're interested in data engineering at all, I definitely recommend checking that out. Okay, and that's all of the what's on I have for now. Let me throw it over to Arjen and JM for what's happened in AWS in the last month.
Hey everyone, as Rob said, welcome again.
Hello everyone, thank you for having us.
So unfortunately, February was a bit of a disappointing month when it comes to news, but we've still picked out some of the highlights. So for finally in Sydney, what we got the 6GD instance types, which is basically the same as the other Graviton 2 instances, except they come with some pretty big, fancy, fast hard disks included.
So yes, they are. Yeah, go ahead.
No.
They are AWS Graviton 2. We had many now deployed in Sydney, like the T4G that you can have until the end of March. But yeah, this one with the D, they come with a specific NVMe SSD. The first version is quite small, it's just 50 gigabyte of disk, and then up to 2 terabyte, 2 times terabytes, or 4 terabyte of disk for the 16 extra large or the metal version.
Yep. And the other new instance type is the M5ZN, which is for 100 gigabits data connection or network connection. So that's also nice if that's your kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
this one as well. So this one doesn't come with any SSDs. They just come with good network, and they are as well 45% better threaded compute. With you can expose the Intel VTX, and you can have a bare metal version as well. They're quite expensive. So if you compare the M5 with the M5 ZN, yeah, they are 45% faster, but they are 60% more expensive.
And the other thing is we've now got 100 gigabits direct connect options in Sydney.
Yeah, that's very exciting. The first link we have in Sydney, so it's only one, is Equinix SI3 in Sydney, that you can have now a 100 gig direct connect. You don't need to do trunking or anything like that. In the past, you have to have 10 gig to be able to do 40, but now you can do straight 100. The cost, however, is 10 times bigger than the 10 gig, so it's around 16,000 US a month. That's 21,000 Australian dollars a month to have a port of 100 gig. But I'm sure some customers are going to use that.
Yeah, I'll not use it to replace my NBN quite yet. Oh. The serverless side, it wasn't, like I said, there wasn't that much. Lambda support for Node.js 14 is obviously good if you're in the Node.js space. There's a bunch of new features that, honestly, I don't know because I tend to avoid Node.js.
It's a long-term service release for Node.js, the version 14, so that will be supported until April 2023. So that's quite good on that end, and you can run it on Amazon Linux too as well inside your Lambda function. So that's a bit of improvement as well.
Yep. And Amplify now supports Flutter. In case you're not familiar with Flutter, it's a generic language that you can use to build both iOS and Android, but also web or native macOS, Linux type applications. So it sounds pretty good. I haven't used it myself, but it's always good to see some improvement there.
So it was in preview for a while, now it's GA, so you can start using it in production.
Yep. Good. On the container side, EKS support for Kubernetes 1.19. Yeah, if you use it, then you might be happy about some new features. Other things, though, what I found personally more interesting on this list is app mesh support for mutual TLS. Mutual TLS is the thing where certificates have to be supplied from both sides to make sure that the connection is all secure and trusted. The implementation here is different than it was in API Gateway. You don't need to use the private CA for it, so that makes it more interesting to use. That said, if you don't need it, avoid it because it brings a lot of extra overhead and complications.
Yeah, but some application like open banking or other type of banking application kind of need MTLS. So now I think AWS is the only cloud who support MTLS end-to-end from the API gateway entrance to now inside microservices with app mesh. And you can run that on EKS, on ECS. So it's pretty exciting, I think, to have that feature. Well, people need it. And then the other exciting feature is EKS support OIDC user authentication. In the past, you could do that through IAM. Now you can link it with other identity providers to make sure that your kubectl is secured. And there is a good blog. We can put the link that you can integrate your EKS with Cognito. as authentication or IDC. So that's pretty good improvement. Some other cloud were doing it, so it's good that AWS is doing it now.
Yeah. Cool. On the DevOps side, a couple things here. So X-Ray Insights is basically a machine learning layer thrown on top of X-Ray that should pull out ideas or possible issues for you. This was in GA in preview for a while as well, and is now finally GA. So that's
So
cool.
it's all about anomaly detection, and it helps really developers and to find the root cause analysis of their application, and if there is any insight they can get from that tool to be able to troubleshoot faster.
Yep. And one that I personally find quite interesting is you could in the past already manage your stack sets that they run automatically for new accounts and such, but you had to do that from the root account, which, as I'm sure JM agrees, is far from best practice. Now
Yes.
you can use a delegated account for that instead.
So that feature seems to be added by AWS at every single product they have been using in the past, like AWS config. Now we have the cloud formation stack sets, security hub. All of that now can be firewall manager. All of that can be in different account than the org account. So that's awesome. Hopefully, we could see maybe if Control Tower could implement that feature. That would be even better.
Yeah. Let's move on, unless you want to talk about
Code Build supporting Graviton, and we are lucky enough to have Code Build in Sydney, so we can start using Graviton 2 for your Code Build and saving some money as well if you want to build some code in there.
Yeah, makes it a lot better if you need to deploy to Graviton 2 instances.
Yeah.
Cool. Security.
Guard Duty's couple of improvement in the machine learning for domain reputation. It tried to predict some domain who might be malicious, and before they have a malicious behavior. So, 4 new kind of impact: suspicious domain requests, Bitcoin domain requests, abused domain requests, and malicious domain requests. And that's analyzing the behavior of your EC2 instance if it does some requests to these domains. So enable Guard Duty if you don't have it already.
Yep. And web supports JSON inspection, which is quite cool.
That's definitely a massive improvement. Yeah, nice to see. The only thing, and I'll read in depth the doc, is only the first 8K of the JSON payload are going to be analyzed, not the whole lot. So make sure that you have a size constraint maybe before that, or you have analyzed your JSON payload a certain way to make sure that you can capture if there is anything in the JSON payload that you want to analyze. Oh, maybe Macy. I wanted to come back to Macy. I think the big difference with the new Macy is that you can go across account now and analyze S3 bucket who don't belong to the same account. So that's a pretty good advantage of Macy. And there is a better as well pricing mechanism. So good to have.
Yeah. Cool. Other cool stuff. The CloudFront Security Savings Bundle. This is similar to reserved instances, as in you purchase an amount of CloudFront usage in advance for 1 or 3 years. You get a discount on that, and on top of that, you get 10% of that amount in web usage for free.
So, for
Which is
example,
nice.
if you have, it's very cool to have some free stuff. So if you buy 70% of months of CloudFront, basically you have 100% to spend, and then you have another $7 of WAF charge will be deducted from your bill. And that includes Lambda Edge, all sort of everything CloudFront. So, it can be very quickly. You can spend that amount of money if you are a general user of CloudFront. So it's good to have some saving.
Jam, I also know that you are quite happy about S3 supporting private link.
Yeah, that's pretty cool features. Bit disappointed the way you need to do it. For every command line, you need to add -- endpoint URL and then your bucket VPC endpoint to be able to talk to your bucket. But when you look at a couple of design for customers, you can start talking to S3 directly from on-prem without having to have proxies and all sorts of things. And you can still use the two endpoints. So you can have the gateway endpoint for your EC2 instance, which is free, which is a routing mechanism, and then the NTFS endpoint, which is more like a DNS mechanism for your on-prem application to talk to the same S3 bucket. And you can apply endpoint policies as well on top of that. So that's pretty good.
Yep. I think we've run out of time though. So just a reminder, we also discussed the news with three of us, because Guy is included there in the podcast. Due to some scheduling conflicts, we won't be recording until next Friday, so it will be a bit longer until podcast will be available. But you can subscribe and listen to all episodes already. And with that, we'll hand it back and thank you all and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Have a good evening. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ian and JM. Let me pull up my notes here. So our first speaker tonight is Jason Wood. Jason has spoken with us before, but I believe this is his first time via a YouTube broadcast. If you don't know Jason, he is the lead consultant with, or a lead consultant with Telstra Purple's managed services. And he's been involved with AWS for a few years now and is currently an APN ambassador. He joins the long list of APN ambassadors that we somehow drag into our events. He has a long history in IT with a background in Unix and Linux administration and backup. So it's a perfect seg into his review tonight of the various AWS native backup options. He looks like he's ready and he's unmuted, so let's throw over to Jason. Apologies, everyone. We can see the screen being shared, but for some reason it's not coming through on the video. Remote camera. Oh, what happened there?
Cool. Okay, so hopefully everyone can hear me now. Beautiful. Yeah, so as I was saying before with no audio, I'm currently a lead consultant with Telstra Purple's managed services. And as Robert said earlier, I've been a Unix sysadmin and backup administrator for a while. So a little while back, I was having a look at AWS backup. When I say a little while, not too far off, and was interested to see, sort of where it is now compared to when I looked at it. Sort of, I think it was probably around mid to late 2019, and it was interesting to see sort of how it had come along. And so I thought, there might be a bit of a story here. So this talk's going to be a little bit different to the standard talks that sort of cover a technical product. So this is sort of going to be a bit of a journey in the life of the AWS's native backup products. So I'll look at both Data Lifecycle Manager and AWS Backup and see where they started life as not quite MVP, but I'd say more barely functional product. And let's just see where they, they started as an ugly duckling and did they become a swan? So Data Lifecycle Manager, that launched in mid-July, and it actually wasn't too bad at launch. It did what it said, took, sort of simple method to automate your EBS snapshots. It had a 12 or 24-hour schedule and daily backups only. Then it sort of sat quiet for a little while. And in November, they added the ability to copy tags from your EBS volumes onto the snapshots and added CloudFormation support, which that was quite nice. So it finished 2018 as functional, but fairly basic. Then we hit 2019, and as you can see, there were quite a few updates that came in. So the first thing in Feb added a whole lot of extra timings for the snapshots. So 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 hours, along with the original 12 and 24. So that was a big boost for if you needed to do more frequent backups for your recovery point time objectives or your recovery point objectives. So that was good start to the year. Then May, instance-based snapshots. So I think this was a pretty good one. Previously, it was just snapshot of the EBS volumes. This time you could tag the instances instead of having to tag the volumes, and all of your EBS volumes were snapped at the same time, giving you some crash consistent snapshots there. Again, another bit of a lull and a bit more activity at the end of the year. So you're able to tag policies, but again, we got time-based retention. So you could now set your retention to be a number of days, weeks, months, or years, whereas previously the retention was based on the number of snapshots. So, for example, if you took backups every 12 hours and you wanted to have a week's retention, you'd have to set your retention to be 14. So two snapshots a day by 7 days. Now you could just say, yep, I want 7 days retention. And then December brought in the ability to do a cross-region copy of the snapshot. So once your snap finished, it would then copy that snapshot to up to 3 different regions. So yeah, so 2019 saw some significant improvements, and you could sort of see there was a little bit of a focus there on the number and type of snapshots. So gives you a bit of a view on how the product moved along. We're still missing an option to do restores, which is a bit of a pain. So you can still obviously go in and do your standard restores from snapshots manually, but yeah, not there. Then 2020 actually saw again another slew of updates to DLM. So smallish one in March, along with all the other intervals, they increased it to a 1 hour interval. And then May, which I think was good, added support for using cron expressions for the schedules. So that sort of really rounded out the scheduling side of things. And along with that, too, previously you only had daily schedules. Now you could schedule based weekly, monthly, or annually. September rolled around and they added in the ability to have multiple schedules per DLM policy. So this is really good if you wanted to have separate daily and then monthly schedules, rather than having to have separate policies for each. You could wrap them all up in a single policy and have, here's my dev policy that does dailies and it will do the, your monthlies. After September, again, a couple of months of quiet, and November and December, there's a bit of flurry ending off the year. November brought in the ability to create AMIs for your snapshots as well. So this is really handy, especially say Windows instances where it's much nicer to recover from an AMI. And along with that too, the associated management of the AMIs through the lifecycle policy. December then brought in the ability to do cross-account copies. So as we saw last year, again, that was in December. They had the cross region. Now you could actually do cross-account, which was a much better option for DR if you're looking at that. And also too, you could encrypt those snapshots with a CMK from your target account. So really we finished off 2020 adding a lot of polish to Data Lifecycle Manager, really around scheduling and the cross account for DR was good, the AMIs. So DLM still finished off there very targeted. It's targeted just at EBS snapshots, and that's highlighted, by DLM being inside the EC2 menu. And you've got the extra multiple scheduling options, but still no automated restore function from DLM. So that sort of showed you looking. I'll flick back through the sides, looking back from starting off in July with a really basic, and then you sort of get a bit of a view of how the devs just add on to their products, taking up to the end of 2020. So the other one that we'll have a look at is AWS backup. So where DLM was just purely focused on your EBS, at the start of January, AWS announced AWS backup, and that covered your EBS. It also covered the RDS, DynamoDB tables, storage gateway, and I think sort of the big thing that was quite awesome was EFS file systems. Prior to AWS backup, all the options for backing up your EFS file systems were, effectively make a second one and have some method to copy your data across. Yay. Not really backup, that was just a second copy. So started off, and then there's a bit of a lull, and a lot of bang in 2019 came from regional expansion. So like a lot of products, it only launched in a few regions first off, and then expanded April, June, October, added regions and regions and regions. I'm pretty sure by October it was pretty much GA. Then if we jump back a couple of months, May they added CloudFormation support, and July added some the ability to copy the tags from your source resources to the recovery points, and October added SNS. So there wasn't a whole lot of addition in 2019. It was mainly, I think, looked like rolling the product, launching the base product, and then rolling it out to various regions with a couple of small updates. Then we came to 2020. So 2020 gave us a few things which I thought some nice updates, some things that I think should have been there for quite some time, but started off with adding instance-based EBS snapshots with the option to have the AMIs there too. This was one that I was quite surprised wasn't there at the start, given that DLM had the instance-based snapshots much earlier, and so why that wasn't released at the same time with AWS Backup, don't know. Another nice feature that they added in January was item level recovery for EFS. So prior to Jan, recovery for EFS was basically recovering the whole EFS file system. So if you just needed a couple of files or a directory, had to recover the whole thing. So this update in Jan lets you have individual file or directory recovery. So that was actually quite a nice feature. And also January added in cross-region backups as well, except for DynamoDB. So yeah, you could again a bit of a boost for DR if you wanted to store your backups in a different region or copy across. That was a good option there. Again, a little bit quiet, and then around the middle of the year we got a bit more activity, and support for Amazon Aurora was added in June, and they then put in some cross-account management for organizations. So this was one of the ones JM mentioned at the start about how a lot of things are moving their to delegated accounts. Unfortunately, backup is not one of them. You still need to be in the root account for that, but this gave you cross-account management only, so you couldn't back up to other accounts, but at least you could manage everything from a single pane of glass. July rocked around, and this one was not so much an addition to AWS Backup, but more something that was added to EFS. Now when you created EFS file systems, or you looked at your EFS file system, they added a checkbox for backups. So this, I think, was quite a nice feature. You could just go in, either for newly created file systems or for existing ones, simple checkbox, and sort of like RDS has had for forever. You now could have daily backups stored for 35 days from just one simple tick, and you didn't need to worry about going through and configuring this yourself within backup. September came around. You could now copy nested EBS volume tags, but I think the big one was the option of application consistent backups for Microsoft Windows. So this one actually needs an agent to be deployed, but AWS Backup will now talk to Microsoft VSS, and this will allow you to have application consistent backups for everything that plays nice with VSS. So SQL Server, Active Directory, Exchange Server. So yeah, I think that was sort of a fairly big addition and worth the wait. And then November. So this was one of those ones where it was like, why the hell did it take so long? FSX Windows and FSX Cluster support was added. These had the ability to take snapshots and manual snapshots for quite some time. So I don't know why it took so long to come into AWS Backup, but yeah, that got added. So I think that was nice. It was one of those things that I was waiting for to see when that would happen. And December was finally rounded out with cross-account backup and recovery. So in June, you had the cross-account management. December actually now added in the ability to have cross-account backup and recovery, except for DynamoDB and your FSX Windows and Lustre. So yeah, again, still limited to organizations, but I think that was a nice round out to the end of the AWS Backup updates. So yeah, these I just had a look to the end of 2020. There have been a couple of updates that have come out this year as well, but mainly sort of around CloudWatch metrics being added into AWS Backup. But yeah, this little talk and this came out of a blog post that I wrote. Finished off checking out up to 2020. So yeah, so as I said, I started off in 2019. I wrote a blog on AWS Backup solutions, both native and having a look at some third-party solutions. At that time, DLM looked okay. Probably fine for non-prod, but nothing super special. And AWS Backup, really when it sort of launched and by the end of 2019 even, yeah, great for EFS. There was really no other option. Yeah, but otherwise, it's a bit meh. So as I said, I had, the thing that got me into this was looking at AWS Backup fairly recently. So yeah, the ugly duckling to swan. Where are we now? DLM, I think, has come a long way. If you're just looking for EBS backups, I think this is an excellent solution. I'm using it myself for just one of my Play servers. It's super simple to set up, keeps track, manages things, and I'd say for non-prod or sort of quick test things, it's quite a good product. Well worth the look. It still doesn't have an automated restore, so I probably wouldn't really use it for production. Usually if you need to do a restore for prod, that's often, there's Sev 1, you're stressed, you want to have something that'll give you a quick single button to restore and not have to worry about launching from Amy's and making sure your volumes are attached in the right ways, things like that. So, but non-prod, where usually there's not quite the stress of, you need to get this done now, got a bit more time. I think, DLM is a great solution. AWS backup, I think the interface is still a bit lacking, but overall it's quite solid. Definitely worth a look at, even for production systems right now. That's really come a long way. There might be some third-party products that have better UIs, better bells and whistles, but the price point for AWS backup is right. It's free. You're just paying for the storage. So yeah. My thoughts: ugly duckling or swan? I'd say DLM is a swan in the right pond. So if you've got the right use case for that, it's excellent. AWS backup, I'd say maybe not quite a swan, but it's definitely looking a lot better than what it was. And it is definitely worth a look for production. So I think that's wrapping up my talk, and ready to answer any questions if anyone has them. Thanks.
Wow, I didn't turn my camera on. I was not ready for this at all. All right. Thanks very much for that, Jason. I had the
okay.
my mic controls in my pocket and my camera turned off, but we're good now. All right. So we had one question come through. Don't forget for anybody else, you're more than welcome to ask your questions now, either on Slack, on Twitter, or in the YouTube channel just there. So the question that we've had come through is from 19 the Con, or Thecon maybe. How does AWS backup play into complete serverless environments?
Complete serverless environments, it doesn't really, well, if you're talking RDS, it will
I guess there's
that,
a couple of parts to that question. Where are you storing your data, and how are you deploying things and stuff like that? Have you seen any practices around on that, mostly serverless setups?
Not really, but again, if you look at what it will back up, so it will do your RDS databases, it will do your DynamoDB tables. So I think those, as far as when we're talking sort of serverless and using AWS services.
Yep.
So those are the two things there. The others, EBS volumes, EFS, are really targeted at the instance sort of infrastructures. I mean, I suppose EFS as well. Now that you can use those with lambdas and the like. So you do have that option, and then obviously storage gateway volumes. That's getting your on-prem in. But yeah, so DynamoDB tables, RDS databases, and if you use EFS with your lambdas and stuff, you've now got those options there, and they just store them in your standard snapshot locations.
Yep, I guess that if you're buying into AWS's serverless environments, you're probably buying into AWS's storage options as well. which should work with, as you've described throughout us tonight.
Yeah. So I suppose I will just say, although this was more designed as a bit of a look at how does your AWS services grow, and you can really use that for a lot of things. I mentioned about the FSX Windows being a backup option. When that first started, again, it was sort of a bit of a barely functional product, and now it's sort of quite fully featured. So yeah, it's sort of interesting having a look at how AWS does things and how things grow. And really, one of the takeaways is if you see something that looks good, but is a bit rubbish, wait.
Yeah, I'd actually honestly forgotten how bare some of those services were when they first launched and how far they've come over the years. We had another question come through from Ian. Have you experienced any issues with data contiguity with either backup service, i.e. problems with live versus offline servers?
I haven't used AWS backup a lot, but I've used DLM a bit, and again, just other products that are using snapshots really. So, I suppose the question really is, what's the snapshot storage like, and restoring from those, and I've not had any issues with that so far. Usually, I'm not a big fan of using snapshots for long-term storage. But that said, I've not had any issues with doing any restores from snapshots before. So, yeah.
Okay. Those looks to be all the questions that we have. Thank you very much for tonight, Jason. It was really informative. I'd forgotten a lot of those problems in the early days. It's great to see how far everything's come. I might have to give backup another look myself, actually. So.
Yeah. No, as I said, when I first looked at it, a year ago, it was like, it's a bit rubbish. Looked at it not so long ago, it was like, it's actually not bad.
Yeah, I think I might need to put in a calendar reminder for 12 months whenever I look at a service and go, that's not quite ready. Maybe come back in 12 months and have a look.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Let's keep going for tonight. Okay. Our second presentation of the night is from Matthew. As we mentioned at the start, Matthew's a seasoned presenter with us. And this looks like it's going to be another interesting one. The bio Matt gave me is very small, so I would just say that he is an AWS Cloud Architect at Civo. That's all I can say. And if he shared his screen and unmuted himself, then we can throw over. Hasn't shared his screen yet. I think our technical problems for tonight are continuing. Well, I can't blame the technology. That was user error, those other two ones. Always the case when you click all the buttons in the console to try and solve a problem and you end up breaking something else. There we go. All right. Let's switch over to Matt.
Fantastic. Okay. So, for those of you who haven't met me, my name is Matthew Mariel. I was, until partway through lockdown last year, a senior cloud architect at Telstra Purple. I'm now located at Civo. Been playing with AWS for, I think the joke there is since it was S2, but I think 2012 when it landed in Australia. I am at heart a maker, a beer drinker, and all-round tinkerer. So when we think about the fact that I'm presenting on IoT today, that really shouldn't surprise too many people. But I have been treating AWS certifications a lot like Pokemon recently. Throughout 2020, in order to stave off, cabin fever and all of those sorts of things, I did the how hard is it to get all of them, and managed to get all of my specialties and that before we went into lockdown last year. And then AWS did me a solid and released 2 more. So I am almost a fully Pokemon trainer. I will get that last one. And that can be a 2021 goal. When I'm not playing with AWS, you'll normally either find me with a soldering iron in my hand or a beer, or if it's Friday, probably both. So I sort of thought today was, how I've been looking at I'm moving house soon, and been looking at how I can automate the house and how I can sort of automate my life a little bit more. We're all talking about moving back to, part-time work in the office and all of these sorts of things. And I was sort of thinking, oh, well, I've got myself set up pretty well in my home office. How do I sort of get all of these productivity enhancements that I've got on my computer and the cloud and all of these sorts of things into the wider world? So I've sort of been doing a lot of research lately into IoT and RoboMaker and all of those sorts of things to sort of see if I can get things a little bit more cohesive. So when I sort of realised there was the speaker spot open, I sort of thought, well, now's probably as good a time as any to sort of sit down and give people a high-level overview of what the AWS IoT products suite actually looks like nowadays. It's one of those sorts of product suites that, unless you're actually tinkering in IoT land, you don't really have much of a need for any of it. So much like we were talking about services that we don't really look at all too often. I jumped back into the IoT suite a couple of months ago and went, oh, that's right. All of this stuff was released at the end of 2019, and I haven't had a chance to look at it. So I thought now would be a good chance to just sort of walk through, what's available, what's out there. Then I figured I'd walk you through the project that I'm sort of working on at the moment, and a few of the gotchas and the pitfalls and tribulations and all of those sorts of things that I'm starting to come across. IoT is one of those things, not just the AWS side, but the physical side as well, that anybody who's tried it, done it, dabbled with it will attest to the fact that, if you think it's going to take an hour, it's probably going to take 10, at least the first time. So any tidbits I can sort of give people to help might save a lot of people a lot of time in the long term. And then I figured I'd just wrap up with a little bit of some learnings and some places that I use for advice and direction, and a starting point for anybody else that might be interested. So jumping into the overview of the IoT product suite, there are actually 10 core AWS products in their product suite at the moment. If you ignore the robotic side of sort of the IoT landscape, which for the purposes of this conversation we will. So I figured I'd just do a quick run through, because like a lot of things in AWS land, S3 buckets being a prime example of it, there are 1,000,001 options and 1,000,001 different ways to set things up, configure them, and it can be a little daunting for people when they're first getting started. So I figured I'd just give a quick minute or two introduction on each of these, just to sort of give people the which ones you should look at now, and which ones you should sort of put on the radar for once you start getting down the stack, or once you start running into particular issues. That's a good time to start looking at the others. So the first cab off the rank is IoT Core. That's sort of the fundamental, where it all began service for the IoT suite. This, at its heart, is a secure way to do MQTT messaging between your device and your AWS environment. It is mutually, it's encryption keys at both ends. It's secure communication and gives you a nice way to publish and subscribe to messages coming to the device and from the cloud. It uses standard MQTT topics, so it's easy to work with if you want to tie it into other things and Lambda functions and all of those sorts of things. It is very easy, very quick to do. It is very low. It's very low weight. It's got very little overhead. Even when you start getting down to things like, what's an MQTT load on a microcontroller versus a HTTP, I don't know. We tend to forget just how big some libraries can be. And when you're talking about microcontrollers with 2 KB, 4 KB, 8 KB of RAM, a HTTP library, kind of a non-event. So, MQTT gives us a good, nice, easy way to get the messaging capability in place without a lot of the bells and the whistles. Along the same sort of lines is FreeRTOS, or depending on who you want to talk to and how long you've been in the FreeRTOS community, a FreeRTOS. FreeRTOS is a free real-time operating system. It's an open source project, and a couple of years ago, Amazon created a flavor of FreeRTOS that natively integrates back into the AWS product suite and gives you a nice, easy way to run a real-time operating system on a range of microcontrollers, 8266s, ESP32s, a lot of the Atmels and all of those sorts of things, and sort of gives you a nice way to be able to get real down into the nuts and bolts on how these things run, how they operate, and getting them to integrate back into your environment. It is a very, very powerful product. Once you get your head around it and get all of the libraries configured and get your CMake running, because it's all native C, it actually comes with all of these scripts to pre-deploy certificates, push images to devices, configure things like Wi-Fi keys and all of those sorts of things. So it does come with a lot of power, but does have quite a steep learning curve if you're not a native C developer at heart, which, yeah, I have to say I wasn't when I started, and I still don't consider myself a C programmer, but I can mash the keyboard almost enough to make it work. But does give you a lot of flexibility, and he's really, really powerful and really, really low weight. Going back the other way, so if we think of FreeRTOS as sort of getting down to the raw, the raw end of the deal, IoT one-click is sort of the opposite end of that. IoT one-click, think of the Amazon dash button. That's really what it is. They are simple button devices that can trigger a Lambda function in your AWS environment. Don't bother. It's a wonderful service. It is very easy. You push the button, it runs the Lambda function. It can come with, dedupe support and all of those sorts of things. Unfortunately, these land in the same bucket as hardware MFA keys. We live in Australia, and apparently we're not worthy when it comes to hardware. If you have a look at the AWS product page, there is one device that is available on Amazon.com that you can get shipped into Australia. It is $30 plus about $20 for postage, and that's all US, so it's more like $80 Australian for the button. Do yourself a favor, get yourself an ESP32 and solder a button onto it. The code is super simple, could not be easier, and a homemade solution will cost you about $4. Moving on to IoT Analytics. IoT Analytics is pretty much what it sounds like. It's pre-built analytics toolset for running large-scale analytics on your IoT suite. So this is aimed at large-scale IoT deployments. Think industrial scenarios, where factories, processing plants, those sorts of things, and being able to do near real-time analysis on all of the incoming sensor data. Device Defender and Device Management. Device Defender is a security suite. It is built to be able to audit your IoT devices. You've got certificates out there, you've got access policies, you've got firmware versions and all of these sorts of things that you want to be able to monitor, you want to be able to update, and you want to be able to identify when a device might have been compromised, so that you can take remediative action. They have launched a ML component to this, where they are running, analytics over the top of it in order to be able to do, predictive warnings and all of those, abnormal behavior and all of those sorts of things. Haven't had a chance to really get into the weeds on what that looks like, how that works. But this is really when you start getting to the bigger scale, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of devices. Device management, the easiest way to think about device management, systems manager for IoT devices. It can give you things like over-the-air update capability. It can give you the ability to do firmware checks. It can give you the ability to do remote diagnostics. It can give you the ability to locate devices, and a whole range of large-scale management activities. Again, it's one of those things that you would probably want to look at when you're at the 3, 4, 5 digits worth of devices. IoT events. When you're getting into IoT, start with IoT Core, then look at IoT events. IoT events I can sum up pretty simply as the if this then that, or a Zapier of AWS IoT. If then else. If the motion sensor gets tripped, then turn on the lights. Pretty simple, pretty easy. Takes away none of that you can't do in Lambda functions or your own code or anything along those lines. This just takes away a lot of the undifferentiated heavy lifting and makes it very simple, very quick. This is incredibly handy for proof of concept MVPs, MVSs, those sorts of things, to just get you up and running. IoT Greengrass. Greengrass is kind of the go-to for the Raspberry Pi world of, quote, IoT. It gives you the ability to run services on the edge. So, if we have a Raspberry Pi, we deploy that with Greengrass, we can get the ability to have our IoT things, using the IoT, SDKs, we can have those talk to the Greengrass. The Greengrass can cache data in the event that the internet goes down. It can process the data locally, so we might have data coming in from 10 sensors, and the Greengrass device can monitor those and then batch send them up into the cloud, or it can notice one sensor, the result of one sensor can trip another sensor's action. We can run Lambda functions on them and all of those sorts of things. So Greengrass kind of pushes down a lot of the functionality onto a local device. We all live in Australia. We all know the NBN. We all know that we can't rely on internet. Greengrass is kind of one of those must-have things for any real sort of deployment. Site-wise, again, is one of those things people starting off in IoT land probably aren't going to deal with too much. Again, this is aimed more at your industrial processing, large-scale factory automation. It's around getting understanding at a site or multi-site kind of level. So, getting 1,000 or 10,000 sensors coming back to get the real-time idea of what's going on in my factory or in my, refinery or in my processing plant. So again, not one of those things that you're typically gonna play with too much when you're starting off. And then Things Graph is, well, again, it's kind of in the name. An IoT thing is what AWS call an IoT device. Things graph is effectively the graph nature, making visual, making the IoT world that little bit more visual and easier to understand the ins and the outs of your environment, the interconnectedness, and all of those sorts of things. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an overview of the IoT product suite. That's not a particularly tangible explanation. When I was going through this presentation earlier today to go, do I have everything? Do I have it all sort of sorted out? I realized one small little problem with running an IoT presentation remotely, and that's IoT is very touchy-feely, visual kind of thing. So it's a little hard to sort of, show a lot of these kinds of things in action. So we may need to look at doing a follow-up presentation when we're all allowed to, see each other in the real world again. But just to sort of move on, we know what the product suite looks like. Just a little bit of a walkthrough of what the proposed project sort of looks like. So if we think about it, I really want to automate my house using AWS IoT. But expanding on that, I also want to automate other bits around me. I want to have it so that when I'm on my way home, it knows to turn the lights on. Or if I'm heading to the office, then it knows that it should be pushing me work information to my phone, not personal information to my phone. I might want to turn on a different type of notification suite, or I might want to have certain things happen, when I'm on my way home. Now, none of that is particularly hard to configure using a myriad of other random things. You've got things like Home Assistant, you've got smart things, you've got Alexa, you've got HomeKit, you've got a million and one other things. And that's kind of half the problem. If we look at a lot of those sort of solutions, they can be quite expensive. A $40 device doesn't sound expensive, but if I'm buying a $40 device to monitor my window or my door, and I have 20 doors, I have to either decide to spend a boatload of money or decide that I only want to monitor a subset of my doors. So now I'm making a compromise on my solution for what is effectively me going on AliExpress, buying a whole bunch of ESP32s for $2 a piece, soldering on 20 cents worth of electronics, and 3D printing a case. Well, that's pretty easy. So I'm kind of looking at AWS going, well, this seems like a pretty logical way to do it. Plus, everything else in my life already runs in AWS land. So if I want to automate my life, kind of seems like the logical place to do it. So if we decide on AWS being the endpoint, we already understand that it needs the ability to understand the state of the world around me. So that's pretty easy. AWS IoT does that. It needs to be cheap, and I'll go through the pricing model a little bit later. But it is cheap. I live in Australia, so it needs to work offline. Well, we know that AWS Greengrass does that. Want the ability to track, monitor, and report on environment state? Well, when we look at IoT core, we've got things like device shadow and device registry, and we can push everything up to the cloud. And let's face it, when we get it into AWS, we can run it through Kinesis, we can put it in Redshift, we can put it in DynamoDB, we can pump it out to QuickSight. We have 1,001 options at that point. So we've got no problem with being able to track, monitor, and report on things. I personally need to learn this thing, machine learning. I made a mistake years ago by thinking that containers were going to be a passing fad. So I'm not going to make the same mistake again, this time with machine learning and artificial intelligence. So this probably feels like as good a project as any to sort of get my feet wet. And then finally, whatever I do implement needs to pass the partner test. Let's face it, I am a geek. I am a nerd. My partner is not. It needs to work. And if it does fail for whatever reason, it needs to fail fast. It needs to fail gracefully. If she wants the TV to work and whatever my solution is breaks for whatever reason, she needs to just be able to push a button and have it turn on. So, when we think about the AWS land, they are all built for reliability, and we can, put in failure scenarios, and we can test it using all of our standard methodologies. So we should theoretically be good there. moving on to, so if we sort of think of that as the project and sort of the key things we've got to think about when we're looking at the project, how am I sort of approaching the project? And the key question that sort of comes up is, why on earth would I want to custom build this using AWS IoT when, again, as I alluded to before, HomeKit, Alexa, Home Assistant, Smart Things, there are solutions out there that already exist. So I'm kind of doing a lot of work here that to a certain extent has kind of already been done. And as I mentioned, on the second slide, I am a maker and a tinkerer at heart. So, my immediate comeback to that would be like, why not? Have soldering iron, we'll build. If AWS IoT is good enough for the likes of LG, NASA, iRobot, these sorts of things, then, from a reliability and functionality standpoint, it's probably good enough to turn my lights on and off. Like, this is not a particularly hard thing. Like, at the end of the day, if some of this fails, it's not going to be the end of the world. The rest of it is just relatively simple on, off, report, state, push data, those sorts of things. So as far as, learning the platform and, all of this, it shouldn't be particularly difficult. And then the last one is cheap. Is very cheap. So the good old AWS free tier gives us a lot of resources. So we get charged, when we're talking IoT, we get charged for the basic things like how many minutes per month is a device connected to the service, how many messages are we pushing, how many state changes are we pushing, how many rules are we triggering. And as it sort of lies out here, like 2.2 million minutes of connection per month. Well, no, that's great, right? Well, what does that sort of, collate to? Well, the fact of the matter is I can have 50 devices connected 24 hours a day, and every device can be pushing 300 messages, and every device can also be making 130 state changes, and every device can also push 150 rule executions per day before I pay a cent. And to give you a little bit of an idea on what, this costs after the free tier, well, 1 million minutes of connection, which would be enough to support another 25 devices, costs 0.9 cents. Okay, US, so call it 1.5 cents, 2 cents on a bad day. We're not talking bulk heaps of money here. Okay, we're going to need some hardware. Well, when it comes to microcontrollers and all of those sorts of things, AliExpress does pretty good. In fact, I just recently ordered a pack of 50 ESP32s, which are nice little microcontrollers. They support FreeRTOS. They've got like 30 digital pins on them. I think they cost me a grand total of about $3 a piece landed in Australia. You can't buy, any of this stuff for, 5 times the price in Australia. And, when you compare it to a lot of your other, your Z-Wave or your Home Assistant sensors, that are going for $40, $50, $60 a piece. If we look at like Fabaro is a very popular home automation company. They have a motion sensor, really wonderful motion sensor that you use to track when people enter and exit a room. That goes for $80. Now, an ESP32 can be picked up. It can be paired with a PIR motion sensor. The ESP32 is going to cost me $3. The PIR motion sensor is going to cost me about 23 cents. A little bit of plastic, a little bit of solder, and we're a 20th the price for the same functionality. So, this stuff can be incredibly cheap. They say imitation, is the greatest form of flattery. And when we start thinking about how I'm actually looking to, build all of these things and put it all together and all that sort of stuff, the AWS Reference Architecture Library is kind of, my go-to whenever I'm sort of trying to build something. So, look for IoT, and what do we have here? This is freely available on the AWS website, but gives you a little bit of an idea. If we think from the telemetry perspective, one of our key outcomes was the ability to capture, track, log, monitor, and report on the status of our devices. Well, if we look at this, we've got our devices in the top left-hand corner. Those things running FreeRTOS can talk to Greengrass. Greengrass can talk to the cloud. We can trigger our events off it. We can pump it all into DynamoDB. We can query it using IoT analytics, pump that into QuickSight for some nice reports, and we can even back end an API gateway onto it if we want to really start going down the rat hole. So this absolutely gives us the reporting capability that we're looking for. If we think about one of our other goals, Matt needs to learn machine learning, again, we have the same sort of thing here. We have our ability to grab our locally connected devices. We can pump that into our Greengrass core. We can have our ML models calculating, training and optimizing using SageMaker off the information being pulled from the devices. We can pump that back to analytics so that we can, develop our understanding of the data better long term. And we can, even if we want to, do the same thing with video inference. So, last year the ESP32 cam was released. Now, this is a little 720p webcam that can be attached directly to an ESP32 that costs about $3.50 if you buy them in bulk. Now, the ESP32 gives you Wi-Fi. The ESP32 cam gives you a 720p camera. So for less than $10, we have a fully wireless 720p webcam that can, using FreeRTOS, pump our video either to our Greengrass device or straight up into Kinesis video streams to do near real-time video inference across our environment. It gives us a lot of possibilities when it comes to video inference and understanding that wasn't a person that just walked into the room, that was the cat. And then, because at the end of the day, I am a tinkerer, I don't like to do the same thing twice. We want to be able to automate the command and control side of these things. And we want to be able to interact with them. And we want to make it easy, not only for myself, but for my partner and anybody else who's around. We want to be able to integrate these things into, our Alexas. We want to be able to integrate them into API gateways to be able to get them to interact with everything else I've already got working in my life in the AWS cloud. So again, looking at the command and control reference architecture, we can see that we've got that flexibility as well. So both, having information coming in from the environment through our Alexa devices or our API gateways into our IoT and being able to drive the state of our devices, or vice versa, having our devices be able to push back the other way and notify our Alexa devices. Prime example there might be we have a device hooked up to, the dishwasher or the washing machine that notifies us when the power draw drops, because we know if the power draw drops on the washing machine that the washing machine stopped, which means load is finished. We can have Alexa announce to us to say that the washing's finished and needs to be put out on the line. So we can take a lot of those and sort of start building out. We can take a little bit of the telemetry and build that to do our reporting. We can take the ML to build out our understanding of that. We can take out the command and control in order to give us some interactivity and some flexibility around the failing fast and the being able to be partner friendly. So at the moment, I've got my ESP32s, they've got them running FreeRTOS, I've got them communicating with the AWS environment. That's all great, that's all fantastic. I can now officially tell when the window or the door has been opened. That is step one. So, where to from here? Well, getting this far has already taught me a lot that people getting into this need to, or would probably benefit from learning. If we look at the FreeRTOS sort of side of the world, and this was kind of my one key set of takeaways that I wanted to sort of give people for today. FreeRTOS, incredibly powerful, incredibly flexible, and highly advised. If you're interested in this sort of thing, give it a crack, give it a whirl. However, be very careful when reading the AWS documentation, because not all of it is clear, and some of it links to third-party websites that may or may not necessarily be accurate and up to date. when you're running FreeRTOS, you need to download the relevant libraries for the hardware that you're working with. Have a look at the AWS website. It'll tell you what devices are supported and which ones aren't. For me, I'm using the ESP32 suite, and for that meant I needed to download the ESP IDF from the ESP manufacturer's website before you start configuring up all the AWS native features. In the AWS documentation, it says, read their website and continue up until the getting started bit. What they actually mean is until you get to the getting started bit on the 4th page, not the getting started section on the 1st page. So you actually need to do a fair bit on that from the manufacturer's side before you actually get to the AWS environment. Otherwise, you sit there going, yeah, but it says command not found, and I don't know what's going on here. The second one is a lot of AWS's documentation when it comes to FreeRTOS, and particularly the ESP IDF, refers to version 3.3. Yeah, don't use that. Scroll further down the page and make sure you use version 4.2, or you'll very quickly be trying to work out why the documentation is telling you to use things like Python 2.7 in 2021. It's not that this stuff's out of date, it's just that you're reading the information for an out-of-date version. The third one is kind of a gotcha. Linux users will be aware that, when you're doing these sorts of things, sometimes you've got to be a little bit more explicit. Mac users, not always. When you're working with, and this goes for most of the time when you're working with microcontrollers, be they Arduino, be they the AT Megas or anything along those sorts of lines, when you're trying to push your code to your device, you will more than likely need to define the USB port that it's attached to. For Windows users, you'll actually be using a custom application to compile and upload the code. So in that instance, it actually takes care of it for you. But Mac and Linux, when you get to that point, if you actually scroll a little bit further down in the documentation, you'll actually see a note that says, you may need to tack this on if it's suffering, input-output errors when trying to communicate with the USB port. Taking all of that into consideration, sort of where is it next for me, and sort of where do I sort of see it going? Well, I've got, as I said before, I've got my ESP32. I've got to communicate in with the cloud. That's great. That's fantastic. But again, Australia, internet, NBN. I need it to be able to work offline because solid internet isn't a thing here. So green grass is the next logical step for me. The next bit is integrating with other services. If we looked at the reference architecture to get ideas on where we're sort of going and how we want to sort of set things up. Kinesis, Lex, Poly, Alexa integration, SageMaker for our machine learning. These are sort of the services that we're going to look at integrating with. As I also alluded to in the ML, Kinesis video with the ESP32 cams, logical next step. Pump that in, start doing some machine learning, identify, what's usual, because there you could also start doing some really interesting things on behavioral analysis and all of those sorts of things. And then the last one, for some of you, you will have been aware that last year during lockdown, I started, down the robotics path. Thought, I'll take advantage of being in lockdown and start building robotics. And then very quickly realized that robotics, I need parts from China. Parts aren't coming from China because of, 2020. This isn't really working the way I kind of envisaged. This was a bad idea. I am kicking that off again this year. I've officially built the base, so I now have the beginnings of a robot. So again, once we come back in the real world, I'll be more than happy to sort of bring that into a meetup, and we can start taking a look at what does robotics look like when we start expanding all of this stuff out. That was all great for me. If anybody else is sort of interested in AWS IoT, as I said before, start with IoT Core, right? MQTT topics, device shadows, gives you a lot of options, a lot of flexibility, and from there you can integrate with anything else. Greengrass, if you've got the compute power and want offline capability, Raspberry Pi is the natural go-to. Works on standard Raspberry Pis, works on the compute modules, works on 2s, 3s, 4s, all the minor versions. I believe it works on the 0. I'd have to double check. If you want to go the next level and go down the MCU route, and that's microcontroller unit, not Marvel Cinematic universe, FreeRTOS is your friend. Native C, can be a little bit daunting, but gives you unfettered, capability and power. And then lastly, again, I alluded to this back in the beginning, IoT events. It's the if this then that of IoT. Get data in, if movement, turn on light. As far as reference material, tips, tricks, and all that sort of stuff, IoT Atlas, great source, gives you a lot of they've got a lot of information there around how to solve common IoT problems. They've got a lot of design tips and tricks, and also goes from sort of the beginning right up to the industrial scale sort of thing. ESP32.net, if you're going down the ESP32 route, they have everything from getting started through to raw native C assembly language. Let's go build ourselves a proper connected product. AWS.training. I don't typically recommend the AWS training website all that much because more often than not, it's more salesy stuff. But when it comes to the IoT land, I found the training website is really useful for understanding the nuances of IoT core versus greengrass versus when would I use this versus when would I use that versus I know what I want it to do, which product should I be looking at. And then lastly, if you really want to go down the rat hole, AWS have actually built a book on building connected devices. It reads a lot like the well-architected framework in that it goes very, very deep. If you're interested in this sort of thing, absolutely take a look, have a read. It's one of those you've got to provide your name, email address, phone number, all that sort of stuff. But it's there, it's available. Take a look if you're interested. And then a quick little shout out from me personally. Again, as I realized earlier today, IoT doesn't naturally translate when you're trying to give a presentation and all of that. So one of the things I'm looking at doing is actually walking through this in more detail on my YouTube channel. I'll actually start walking through building all of this stuff, walking through a lot of the code, and also looking at the robotic side as well. How it's sort of integrated, how we're using RoboMaker, and sort of the building blocks that go into doing all of that. Again, the YouTube channel was one of those things that I was going to kick off last year, but 2020 didn't exactly go to plan. So I'm actually aiming to upload the first video to that channel in the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for that one. And with that, I am, 3 minutes over schedule.
Cool. Thanks, Matt. That was great and interesting as usual. While we are waiting for all the shy people to come up and ask some questions, I figured I'll ask what I think is the obvious one. What part did you enjoy playing around with most?
The bit for me, without a doubt, is it's very pie in the sky when you first get started, but when you can actually have that first message pump into the wider AWS environment, so get the message coming in from the device on the MQTT stream, and then from there being able to trigger a Lambda function or have the data pump into a DynamoDB table, that's the, okay, now we can really start to get into the fun stuff, where we can start really playing around with it. So that was kind of the wouldn't necessarily be the funnest. To get to that point, I sort of sacrificed a couple of microcontrollers along the way. Soldering iron in the wrong spot, not paying attention to what you're doing. But yeah, that's definitely the most rewarding bit.
Nice. Yeah, it sounds like you had a lot of fun playing around with this.
It's free time's the bigger problem, or lack thereof.
Yeah. I don't know.
No?
Oh, actually, a question from a person called Rob. conversely, which bit needs the most improvement, or you should just stay away from completely?
One you should stay away from completely. I'd say it is and it isn't green grass. Green grass is incredibly powerful and opens up a lot of possibility. But with great power comes great responsibility, and in true AWS fashion, the documentation and the deployment instructions are not great. It is very convoluted to get up and running. There are a lot of steps, and the documentation will not set you up for a repeatable way of doing things. It is great for the first time you're getting into it and you sort of just want to get your first Raspberry Pi up and running so you can say you've deployed Greengrass. But the next time, or the time you want to blow that away and actually put it in a production environment, or you want to deploy a second one, yeah, you're doing everything exactly the same way again, because it is all point and click, run this command, do this, then go in here and update that, then go into the management console and click around here for a while. It is not clear how you then translate all of that into CloudFormation templates and on-device scripts, be it with Systems Manager or some other mechanism. It needs that whole area needs a lot of uplift to make things easier. But at the same time, once you get it up and running, it's an absolutely fantastic. It's an absolutely fantastic thing, right? The ability to run Lambda functions and do analysis on, write a proper full-blown Lambda function, then push it down onto the device, have all the update capabilities and functionality that you've got with all of your other Lambda functions. That's immensely powerful. It's just a hell of a lot of work to get there.
Yeah. Awesome. I don't see any other questions come through. No. So Matt, thank you again. And please, once you have your first video up, if you can share it in the user group Slack, I'm sure a lot of us will check it out. Cool. Thank you. And back to you, Rob.
Right, thank you, Matthew. That was awesome. I think that's also a first for us. We haven't had anybody plug their YouTube channel on this before, so 2021 is off to a great start. Yeah, as I had said, please definitely post the links. Even today, I think you had it in your slides at the end there. If you can throw that on Slack, that would be great. Definitely want to subscribe to that. That's going to be a great journey to follow. All right, that's all we have for tonight. We are a little bit over schedule, but that's all right. We're always happy to take a couple extra minutes of extra content versus finishing on time. And you can probably see that my battery is about to die on my camera up here, so we should wrap it up anyway. Now, our next event is 5 weeks away. Thanks, Ian, for pointing out my error earlier tonight. I had it down as the 24th, but obviously there is an extra week in February, so we're on the 31st of March. At this stage, we are not back in person and we'll still be online. If that changes, we'll let you know. I mean, obviously, as soon as we know either way, when we start in-person events again, we'll let you know. One last shout out to our sponsors for the evening, our gold sponsor Enabler and our silver sponsors AC3, CMD and Do It International. We can't put these events on without you, and we appreciate your support. And that's it. That's it for the night. We have our virtual Zoom pub Slack thing, virtual Zoom drinks. I'll put the link in Slack in just a minute. But that's it for the night. Thank you very much for watching. If you're watching this on delay, obviously don't go looking for a Zoom link. Yeah, thanks for checking out the user group this month. We'll see you again in March.